Half Wheels coverage of the 2023 PCA Convention and Trade Show is brought to you by Rocky Patel.
Hi everyone, my name is Charlie Minato, and this week I am not joined by Brooks Whittington, but I am joined by another member of the Half Wheel team, Patrick Lagreid. How are you?
I'm doing well, Charlie. How are you this morning?
Technically this afternoon, at least where I'm currently at. But yeah, all things considered, not too bad.
Good.
Yeah. So, we are here for the final PCA 2023 preview show brought to you by Rocky Patel. I don't think we're going to talk about the Rocky Patel conviction today because they still haven't announced any details about the cigar, but it is coming at PCA 2022 or 2023, and we do appreciate Rocky Patel for sponsoring not only these shows, but also some of our other pre-show coverage. You'll start to see some other Rocky Patel conviction ads next week, and I get the sense that the cigar is going to be announced at some point soon, but if not, we'll find out about it July 8th through 11th in Las Vegas, which is when the 2023 PCA Convention and Trade Show is. And if you missed our previous 3 shows with technical difficulties, hopefully this one will be better. And just a brief sort of explanation about PCA 2023. It is a large cigar trade show, not just for large cigars, although primarily for large cigars. But it is, I think, the most important event in the cigar industry. Certainly for the American or non-Cuban cigar world, it is, I think, pretty clearly the most important event. And it is also the event where the most number of new products are introduced, both new cigars and new cigar accessories. So today what we're going to do is something we've done for many years, which is to talk about 10 products that we are looking forward to that are debuting at PCA 2023. And so I think for most people, this should probably be the most interesting show. So we'll kind of explain how we got to that list. But before we get to that, Patrick, before we get to that, we do have more live shows coming. None next week, but July 8th. So a week from, or 2 weeks from this upcoming Saturday, tomorrow, we will have live shows live from the PCA Convention and Trade Show floor. These are typically, one of us will interview one person from a cigar company or cigar accessory company, typically about 30 minutes long, and you can see the times. I don't know who we're interviewing because I don't think we figured that out yet, so I can't tell you that. But Patrick, what cigar are you smoking this morning?
So this I stumbled across after we did our walkthrough last night. This is a house cigar made for the Hotel Haya in Tampa, and it is made by J.C. Newman. It's one of the 2 cigars that I believe they make, 2 blends that they make. And I picked this up last time I was in Tampa and didn't get a chance to smoke it. And then a comment that you kind of alluded to that we'll get to later made this stick out when I was walking by one of my humidors last night, so pulled it out and decided to light it up. How about yourself?
I am smoking another cigar that was prompted through the walkthrough. I'm smoking a Don Carlos Eye of the Bull, which I guess the only evidence I have that is what I'm doing is the unique cap. But surprise, it will be talked about later, and I figured I probably had one lying around. Sorry?
But it's not even out yet, Charlie.
I mean, it's not, but I mean, I think yesterday during our walkthrough, you were smoking a cigar that's not even out yet. So, or no, I guess
Fair
that
enough.
cigar has actually shipped, but it was sent to you when it was not out yet. So, I figured I would get more constructive thoughts about it. So, we'll get to the Don Carlos Eye of the Bull shortly. And so, the way this works, typically Brooks is here, but unfortunately he is not today. But the way this works is that each of us come up with a list of 5 or 6 new products that we are interested in trying. There's definitely some crossover between them, but there's also some that Patrick has on his list that I probably wouldn't have put on my list, and vice versa. And we're just going to talk about these. And kind of everything that is going to be mentioned here are things that have been formally announced. So there are certainly many, many more new products that are going to come up. But there are a lot of brands that have not announced anything new, including a lot of the more prominent ones. Patrick and I were sort of running through a list yesterday. There have been no announcements from Altadis USA about new items that are specifically for PCA. Forge Cigar Company, which is part of STG, just announced the first of what I expect is many new announcements from them regarding products that are going to ship in and around PCA 2023. It's been pretty quiet from most of the cigar accessory companies, including the higher end ones that tend to get the flashiest items. And then you have brands that are, I think, are regular half wheel features. Ones like Hoyt and Nicaragua has not announced anything to date yet. Perdomo has kind of teased something, but there's another big brand that has not announced anything. Ashton, JC Newman, Fuente has announced one thing, but it's not all that new, etc. So if you look at the show a week from now, I'm guessing it might be a little bit different, although some of these things would probably still be on there. So with that out of the way, Patrick, why don't you kick us off with the first thing on your list, which, from what I understand, was sort of done by recency and not necessarily this is the thing you're most excited for or fifth most excited for?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't want to diminish my excitement for this because certainly it earned a spot on here, and I think it would have stood out even if it had come out a week or two ago. But earlier this week, Luciano Cigars announced a distribution agreement with Delay Zigarren, which is a German importer, exporter, retailer, cigar manufacturer, cigar brand. And Delay Zigarren had been importing Luciano's cigars into Germany. Now it's going to work the other way, where Luciano will be importing and distributing Delay Zigarren cigars into the United States. So as part of that, they're going to have a presence at PCA. And one of the new cigars that's coming out is called the Delay Istanbul. Now, this isn't made by Luciano and his facility. It is made at another facility that I am going to space on the name of, the Zauberberg factory in the Dominican Republic. But the big thing about this is it uses Turkish tobacco in the filler. And I don't believe I have ever smoked a cigar with Turkish tobacco or have smoked Turkish tobacco on its own. So I'm definitely intrigued by that. Beyond that, it really is designed to be kind of a tribute to Turkish culture. There is some artwork by the artist Hasan Kale, who is known as the Turkish Michelangelo because he does really intricate miniature art, and that's featured on the band. The original is going to be on display in their booth, so I'm intrigued to see that. This is one that just kind of caught my eye as someone that is probably a little more cynical or reserved when it comes to new announcement releases. Just as something that I can tell you I don't think I've tried, and I'm really intrigued to see both how that tobacco tastes as well as how the Delay Zigarren brands get received in the U.S. Because it really, even though it's not a new brand, it is certainly going to be a brand that has not had a presence in the U.S.
Yeah,
Charlie?
I mean, it's I've gotten to meet the Delay guys at Intertobacco in Dortmund, which is another trade show. And I think we reviewed at least one of their cigars. But certainly curious, like you, I don't know if and when the last time I smoked a cigar with Turkish tobacco inside of it was, so that will be intriguing. And I'm a big fan of the artwork. At the very least, it certainly is a lot more involved than most cigar bands, I would say, albeit in a different style. So certainly an interesting product. Yeah. All right, so on my list is the Mikorita Black Papa Saka. So this is the second size of the Mikorita Black line, although if I'm not mistaken, I think there's also a Mikorita Black Unicorn coming to PCA 2023. It debuted last year, or technically, I guess, 2 years ago, as the JR Cigar 50th anniversary, and then the Mikorita Black line was sort of formally released last year, first with the size called the Saka Khan. That cigar is quite large, and you can see the Mikorita Black Papa Saka next to it, and that is a 5 5/8 by 48 Parejo. My, sort of one gripe with the Mikorita Black Saka Khan, the original larger size, is that it is a larger size and a large time commitment to sit down and smoke that. So getting it in a more petite size, even if it's not necessarily a petite Corona or even close to it, I'm a big fan of. For those of you that are curious about what is Mikorita Black, it is supposed to be a stronger, bolder version of the Mikorita, the original one, which is known as Mikorita Blue, and then obviously there is the Mikorita Red label as well. So sort of rounding out that portfolio. And yeah, Patrick, your thoughts on the Mikorita Black, both the Saka Khan and the upcoming Papa Saka?
Yeah, I mean, I think you kind of summed it up. My original experience was with the JR Cigar 50th anniversary version, and I remember picking up a box because I was intrigued by it and being really, really impressed with the cigar and the profile and the flavor and everything. It's a lot of cigar, and there are times where you can have a lot of cigar, and there are times where you can't. And I hope the Papa Saka lives up to my memories of what the JR Cigar 50th offered, just in a smaller format, because I found it to be, like I say, it's fuller, but it's not necessarily a strength bomb. I found it to be really refined. I just enjoyed the heck out of that cigar, so I just hope it translates into the smaller size.
Yeah, I think it's a really good cigar. And one other mention here, there's a lot going on at Dunbarton Tobacco and Trust this year. I feel like a little bit more than we normally get from them in terms of we got new lines, we got lines that are being expanded, event cigars becoming regular production cigars. One other little thing here that almost made this list is the cigar cutter, which we've talked about. Brooks mentioned at some point during one of these shows. But Dunbarton Tobacco and Trust has been working with Cigar Medics, which is the company behind the Baller, as well as the humidimeter. I forget if it's got a D in it. And they've been working on a new single guillotine cutter, which is a higher end, sort of more refined version of the Drew Estate cigar bris tool that came out in the 90s or early 2000s, I guess. And I got to play around with it at TPE. It is an all-metal body, user-replaceable blades, and Steve Saka, founder of Dunbarton Tobacco and Trust, has posted about the sort of trials of iterations that he's gone through to get this cutter here. For consumers, good news, bad news. Good news is you might be able to get one. The plan is to have them available at events. The bad news is it doesn't sound like they are at least initially going to sell them. I will say this, though. Steve Saka's greatest marketing trick is still to tell people that he's not going to sell something. He's just going to make it for himself, and he's not going to sell it because it's too expensive and no one would be stupid enough to pay for it. And then, of course, to then turn around and sell it. So I would suspect at some point he will find out whether or not people are stupid enough to pay for it. But at least for the initial round, it seems like they're going to be only available at events. Patrick, did you get to play around with this cutter at TPE?
I did. It was certainly not the normal way I like to try out cutters and stuff. We were sitting at the table and cut a couple of cigars, and certainly was impressed by it. I've always said it's going to take a lot to pry my cigar scissors out of my hands, but in limited usage, I was certainly impressed with it. I'm really intrigued by the replaceable blade component of it and how that is going to work. It's a bit of a throwback, if I remember correctly, because it's a smaller opening, and I don't know, like, I'm intrigued just to see kind of how it works in real life. When you don't get a great cut the first time and you need to trim something up a little bit, or you need to cut a little more off the cap than you originally intended. And I think that's the only thing I didn't get a chance to do at TPE with it. But yeah, I mean, look, Steve seems to have gone in the deep end over this cutter, and I have no doubt that while it may not necessarily be something I might use on a daily basis, it's going to be a pretty impressive accessory if and when it ever comes out and gets kind of widespread release.
Yeah, if I recall, that cutter has openings on two sides. So I think one of them is a smaller opening, and then on the flip side of the cutter, there's a larger opening. I forget. I want to say that one of them is a 54 ring gauge opening, but I don't remember if that's the larger or the smaller. Regardless, 54 ring gauge would be a lot larger than the Drew Estate Cigar Bris tool, a lot larger than the Paul Gamarian Super Cutter, which is kind of, I think, the sort of ancestors of this cutter in a lot of ways. All right, Patrick, next up on your list is...
Yeah, so this is the Cigars Up Cigar Butler. And as I was looking through our PCA 2023 articles, this one stood out to me. It was announced back in mid-April. And I am fascinated by this from a couple of reasons. Number one, so it is a foot-operated cutter and lighter. Seems to have been born out of the pandemic, out of issues of hygiene and things like that, but also to help retailers prevent their cigar accessories from walking away, as they've been known to do. If you look on the image on the right, it's a little bit easier to see, but there is a 4-slot cigar cutter that you've probably seen in your local cigar shop that has a small straight cut, a larger straight cut, and I believe 2 V cuts, if I'm not mistaken. And then on the right side, there is a torch lighter. Underneath that, there is what's described as a pretty sizable butane tank. And then, like I said, there are 2 foot pedals on the bottom, one for the cutter, one for the lighter. Now, this thing is not cheap. It sells to retailers $1,200 for the plain version that you see on the left, and about $1,500 for the one on the right that has a backlit design. There's going to be some more additional color options and design options coming out. It's also not terribly small. It takes up probably about a 15, 18-inch square space on your floor. And, in some ways, there's something about this that feels like it maybe is a little late to the game coming out of the pandemic when nobody wanted to touch anything, seemingly. But I am really intrigued to see if there is a reception for this amongst retailers. I can make a lot of cases for and against it. I'm just not the one who's going to ultimately be spending my money on it. Number one, I don't have use for it. And number two, there's not a model sold direct to consumer. So I'm just fascinated to see what the reception on this is, and if there's, if people think this is worth bringing into their store, worth giving up some space for, and just sort of how it's received, because it's an interesting idea, but I'm just not exactly sure how it's going to land in retailers' minds when they see it. Charlie, what are your thoughts on this?
I think that I agree with pretty much everything you said. I think you may have stolen my space concerns. That was the highlight of my comments yesterday. I think that's the thing that stands out to me here is that it's like big, which is helpful to getting it not stolen or to prevent it from being stolen. On the other, and like cigar retailers, a lot of them don't have many issues with just adding more and more things and making it more difficult to walk around their stores. I just can't find the use case justification for this, given the size, and also like the 4 cigar cutter, like Palio sells one of these. There are plenty of companies that sell them. Let's say those things are $200. This thing has the lower end is $1,300, so we're talking about 6 of those cigar cutters, and that's the MSRP, not the wholesale price of those. To get one of these things, I just don't. I don't know how that's gonna be an advantageous position if you're trying to sell these things. I'm certainly interested in trying it. I think though this might be one of those instances where it's like trying it once or twice and then realizing that it's actually not a better mousetrap. But yeah, we certainly spent a lot of time yesterday trying to figure out if there were ways to automate cigar cutting and lighting with any sort of efficacy, and I think the answer is, for better and worse, we have really, really good, efficient ways to cut cigars and light cigars at the moment. And maybe don't need another mousetrap, but here, I'm all for people trying. Innovation's cool, even if it doesn't necessarily, you don't hit it on the first time.
Absolutely.
All right,
Charlie, what you got?
Yeah. I have the Intemperance Volstead VO 1920. This is a new regular production line from Roma Craft Tobacco, the first one in a few years, and there's a lot to say here. So this cigar uses an Ecuadorian hybrid Sumatra wrapper, and I knew that this was a likely candidate for this show. So earlier this week, I reached out to Skip Martin, one of the co-founders of Roma Craft, and asked him because I seem to recall a post from either his Instagram account or the Roma Craft account or Mike Rosales, the other co-founder's account, saying something along the lines of the pre-release cigars that we had have a different wrapper than the ones that we're going to show off at the trade show and the ones that we're ultimately going to start shipping as a regular production item. And Skip told me that that is in fact the case. So the story goes something like this. They had finalized the blend using an Ecuadorian hybrid Sumatra wrapper, which Skip says some people will call Ecuadorian Cameroon. He thinks that's not the best way of describing it, and he has some pretty valid reasons as to why that's not a good idea or why it could be misleading. So he finalized the blend. They put it in production at Nicasueño, the Roma Craft factory in Nicaragua, and they start making Robustos. And at some point, from the moment that the blend was finalized to about a week later, I guess, Skip decides that he actually likes the blend better with a different Ecuadorian hybrid Sumatra wrapper. And so they made about 5,000 or 6,000 of the Robustos, and then they changed the blend. And Skip had a number of reasons about why he liked the second wrapper better. And so they ended up taking those cigars and putting pre-release, just simple white bands with black text on them. And they sent them to an event at Two Guys Smoke Shop in New Hampshire, which the event was about 2 months ago. So those cigars are different than the ones they're going to start shipping. There are 5 regular production sizes. I believe I saw a post on social media. They're all $10 MSRP or less. And then there are going to be 6 limited production sizes, like so many other Romacraft limited production items. That means they'll be available once per year in sort of one batch, and then they'll not be available for most of the year, and then they'll come back in the following year. Patrick, any thoughts on the Intemperance Volstead?
Well, I'll say this. I mean, I've always liked the Intemperance line in its numerous expressions. The line that got me was that when Skip said that he wanted to make this blend on the lighter side compared to most Romacraft tobacco blends. I'm always intrigued as to what that means, and in particular what that means within the Intemperance family. So again, this is just a cigar that I'm intrigued to see how it, where it slots in the Romacraft portfolio. Am I inherently intrigued by any particular aspect of the blend? You say Cameroon and you have my attention, but as you mentioned, that's probably not the best description for what this is. So yeah, I think this is just going to be an interesting an interesting cigar to see where it fits in the Romacraft and Intemperance portfolios.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about this last night. Like, I don't mean to blow smoke up, Romacraft's ass here, because I think Half Wheel has a long reputation of not blowing smoke up people's asses. But if I had to sort of like evaluate companies from a quality to value to consistency ratio, right? Romacraft is in like a very special category. If I had to divide cigar companies up like that, I think there are very, very few companies that do it as well as Romacraft does in that regard. And, they don't come out with a ton of new blends compared to most of their peers. And so when they do have a new blend, it's certainly, I think it's something that I'm always going to be interested in checking out, just given the track record that they've got, and particularly that last part, the consistency aspect. They tend to be a company that when they put a blend in production, it seems like that cigar tastes like what it did 5 years ago, and that's not always the case.
And you're right too. I was looking at the story. All the sizes except one, the big Grand Perfecto, are under $10 MSRP as of the article that you put together. So I think in an era where, let's say, we're seeing a lot of expensive cigars come to market. I was looking at the Delay Istanbul. I think that starts at 17.
We're just not seeing a lot of $9 cigars.
Yeah, and if you want to take a flyer on the Izzy Einstein Vitola, which is a 4x46, which is a petite Corona basically, so you're not committing a lot of time to it. It's $6.75. Like, depending on what state you live in and what your taxes are like, a $10 flyer on a cigar, yeah, okay, not, I can live with that. It's certainly better than a $30 or $40 flyer.
If you had to guess, like, if you write about 100 new cigars that come out at PCA 2023, how many of those lines have, let's call it, more than one size that's less than $10? 15%?
Yeah, I certainly think that seeing cigars under $10 these days is probably rare in a rapidly dying occurrence.
Yeah.
For one reason or another. We go through price increases every year, and we've certainly seen a lot of them, or a fair number this year. And I also think there's a certain change in the marketplace about trying to go after higher dollar tickets. Not saying that people are using the Habanos model, because that's a whole different ball game. But, look, if you can sell, what's the old math problem? Like if you can sell 10,000 cigars at $10 or 1,000 cigars at 100, like you'd rather sell 1,000 at 100 because it's less work, right? In theory.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
yeah, no, I was thinking about this earlier. I may write an editorial at some point about this. I think that the Habanos thing I think that it's going to come back to haunt American consumers in a way that they're not really prepared for. I think that some of these cigar companies are looking around at these prices that Habanos is charging and going, you're charging $60 and we're charging $12, and we think we make cigars that are better than your $60 cigars. So we're not going to charge $30, but we're going to start closing that gap. And maybe if, a year ago or 2 years ago it was, we'll increase prices 5%, or, with new lines, we had a new line last year that was $10, and this year we maybe would normally do it at $10.50. Now we're doing it at $12. And I certainly think that the Habanos, sort of what's going on over there with pricing, combined with what we think to be as a market that's going to cool off, or is cooling off, and that means that sales for a lot of these companies are probably going to go down. I think what you're going to see is maybe we skip the $13, $14 starting points and just go from $12 as kind of the median entry level starting point for a Robusto, and now it's going to be $16. It just seems like everything is there for the making for that to happen.
Do you think that's going to be with new lines, or are existing lines going to probably shoot up as well?
No, I think it's primarily, I did this math at the end of last year's show just to sort of test this theory. I think it's very difficult for companies to increase existing products by $2 a cigar. If it's $58, sure. But I think it's difficult for a company to say the cigar was $12 yesterday and now it's going to be $14 today. I think what's a lot easier to do is to say, a year ago we would have charged $12 for this cigar, but now we're going to charge $14 for this new line. We know that cigar companies are not lying when they say that the cost of tobacco is going up, the cost of labor is going up, the cost of packaging is going up. Those are all true. There are some costs that have gone decidedly down. Freight, for example, is way, way down compared to where it was a year ago. I don't think anyone's getting a price break there. And what we also know is that tobacco hasn't gone up that much. They're not just passing that on to the consumer. They're passing that and then some on. And we know this because if tobacco had gone up that much, where a company that, say, 3 years ago would have targeted a line at $10 is now targeting it at $15, well, that should also mean that their existing products should have taken the same sort of 150% increase over the same period of time. That has not happened. And we also have companies like Romacraft that can still figure out a way to make a whole line of cigars that is sold in boxes for under $10. And I don't get the sense that, Skip and Mike are struggling financially, or, they're underpaying their employees or anything like that. So it's possible to make these cigars at prices that are lower than what we've seen. I think that companies rightfully think that the market and the consumers can handle these higher prices.
Interesting.
Well, there's the editorial. Just transcribe it and we can get it posted today.
Well, it does make you wonder, just because we're talking about PCA. You've run average prices of new cigars introduced, right? And wasn't it like 17 last year? Or am I misremembering?
I don't think it was that high.
15 maybe?
I don't remember what the average price is, and that I'm not even sure that I necessarily. I guess I would have had to have done it. What I looked more at is, so I took a company like HVC and said, hey, in 2017, what was the average price of all of the new SKUs that HVC introduced? And then in 2022, what was the average price? Because obviously, and even then, there are some issues where, like, if I did that with the Oliva booth this year, for example, it would not go very well because they have an outlier. They have a $300 cigar, which is a complete outlier for Oliva's long history. Yeah. But I just wanted to see, like, particularly for companies like Rocky Patel, right, that introduce roughly the same number of new SKUs every year. It's 3 new lines, typically 3 sizes. Oh, look, a software update wants to come. And I just said, okay, what's the difference in price over the same period of time? And would that be equivalent to, say, a 5% price increase every year? And the answer was no. It was a bit higher than a 5% price increase every year.
Got it. Yeah, it got me thinking, like, if we were to run averages, like, what year is the trade show's average new cigar price $20?
Yeah, I think the average price probably comes quicker. The median price might take a little bit longer.
Yeah.
I don't think we're that far away. I mean, I think we're, not 2 years away, but I think we're probably within the decade. I would take the under on 10 years.
Yeah. Well, shall we move on? What do you think?
Yeah, and guys, if you have any questions, I don't think we're going to do like an extensive Q&A today, but if you do have some questions related to PCA or some of these new products, we will try to get them answered today.
Other than, why didn't you pick this one? That's the one I'm most excited about.
I can do rapid fires about that. All right. You're up, Patrick.
So my next one, again, I'm going to stick in the accessories category because I do find accessories to be fairly interesting. This is the Cigar Bros Plus Boveda Humidor. And this, to me, is fascinating for a number of reasons. I mean, we've sort of, we've established the traditional humidor, and then we went into acrylics, and we went to plastic for travel. This uses expanded polypropylene, which is a type of closed cell foam. Holds about 80 cigars, and it's not really designed to be portable. It's designed as an alternative for home storage, from everything I can tell. It's priced at $49.99, and again, this is one of those things that I'm just fascinated to see how this works in the real world. As you can see, there's a spot for a Boveda down the bottom. There's a number of features. I know, Charlie, you want to talk about some of these because you do the humidor reviews on Half Wheel. Again, this is one of those things that there has to be some belief in the product because it's coming to market. I'm just intrigued to see how it works. And again, I live in a place that is not terribly conducive to storing cigars, which is, a hot, dry desert environment for most of the year. And given where this is slotting in terms of price and competition, I'm curious to see. I mean, is this better than going to Target and getting whatever those clear plastic tubs, we talk about every so often? What does it do to the flavor of your cigars? I have no idea. I'm just intrigued to try this out and put some real world mileage on it. And Charlie, you do humidors more than I do, so I'm curious kind of how you looked at this and what your initial thoughts on it are.
Yeah, so a few things that stand out to me. I do think this humidor actually might be a great thing for somebody like you in Arizona, because it should be sealed like extremely well compared to a traditional wooden humidor. One thing that stands out to me is that this is one of the rare, specifically cigar targeted products that is also got stacking in, as a feature. So you can see sort of on the lid there where it would be designed to easily stack them. Obviously, you can stack most desktop humidors. Second thing that stood out to me is this is also one of the rare humidors that has a fully removable lid, which is just not something that you see. Boveda's acrylic humidors, Boveda has discontinued selling them, though Northwood's Humidor, which is an online humidor retailer, is using, I think, the same manufacturer that Boveda used. So you can still purchase those, but just from one retailer now. But other than that humidor, I don't know of another cigar something that's actually targeted as a humidor or sold as a humidor that has a fully removable lid. There is one thing that stands out to me that I've started to see come up in more and more new humidors of late, particularly from newer companies, and that is this decision to create a slot for the humidification, in this case the 60-gram Boveda pack, at the bottom of the humidor. This seems like a annoying feature, maybe not a bad idea, but an annoying feature for me and for consumers, because it means that if you want to check or replace this, you're going to need to clear enough cigars out of the way so that you can do so. With the Boveda, it's pretty easy because you're not having to refill it or anything like that. But it's still, I would rather see this not on the bottom of the humidor. I understand why a company would want to put it there. It's kind of wasted space. Humidity tends to rise. You don't have to see it when you open up the humidor. So it makes a lot of sense in that regards, but I think functionally living with the humidor, I don't think that's the best case or the best place to put it.
Yeah. I see a question from Charlie Creekmore. It asked about what's the weight. I have not seen a number officially. I'm looking back at the story. What I can tell you is that it measures 10 inches long, 14 inches wide, and just under 6 inches high. So that's the no, that's this is the dimensions. The company says it can allow up to 80 cigars to be stored. As we all know, that tends to be a bit of a high-end number. But again, it is expanded polypropylene, which is a closed-cell foam. So I can't imagine it's terribly heavy. And again, and then there's durability questions and some other things.
Sorry, I'm just going through my emails to see if the weight was ever specifically disclosed. Does not appear to be. But yes, I would imagine much lighter than pretty much any other humidor of its size, given the material that it's made out of.
Yeah. So again, I'm fascinated to see how this performs kind of real world stuff. And, certainly, $50 to take a flyer, I guess. I don't know if I'm going to put my best cigars in there for the trial run, but nothing less, I hope we do a review on it to see what your experience is, especially through a more scientific and measured testing rather than just, putting it in my office and seeing how it works.
Yeah, I mean, I think that John McTavish's point here, John is of Developing Palates, so that's the one comment Developing Palates is going to get this show. I think that it's a very valid point. Like, you are paying a lot of money to get something. It's still cheaper than most humidors, but you're paying a lot more money for this to avoid reusing a plastic bin or, I think the probably direct comparison to this is actually more like a cooler of some sort. What's the difference between this and, one of those white styrofoam coolers in terms of storing cigars? I'm sure there are some minute differences, but in terms of functionality, I don't really know. I do wonder what the ability is going to be for the company to get the appearance, at least the external appearance, to look different. Because I'm not sure if you'd want to pay, I could understand paying an upgrade over the, $9.99 Rubbermaid plastic container or a $15 cooler to get a better looking thing. I'm not sure how many people would say that this is, 3 times better looking than those options. All right. Next up on my list is the Agonorsa Leaf Anniversario Connecticut. This is a new regular production line from Agonorsa Leaf. It comes in a blue box that looks like that. This is the third blend in the Agonorsa Leaf Anniversario series, so there's also a Corojo as well as a Maduro. And I'm curious about this cigar because this is another rendition, I guess, of a recipe that has sometimes produced excellent cigars, and that would be a cigar company that is known for making, I would say, stronger cigars, taking an Ecuadorian Connecticut shade wrapper, which is generally known for being on milder cigars, and sort of making a cigar with that wrapper and seeing what it's like. A lot of times these have been described as New Age Connecticut's. I think that term, which I may have helped to overuse, is since been way, way overused. But I will say that, I think back to some blends, Gabawan from Taiwahe, Intemperance EC, although I think I still prefer BA better, from Romacraft Tobacco. And then certainly I know Patrick's, waiting to get 2 blends from Hoyt, Nicaragua. I'll let him talk about that. All sort of follow this very similar recipe of company known for making what I would say on the stronger end of cigars, takes Ecuadorian Connecticut wrapper and makes a cigar. All 4 of those cigars that came to mind there, I think are all great cigars, and some of them, as Patrick will tell you about, #1 cigars.
Yeah, I mean, we saw, Hoyt, Nicaragua do the numero uno. As it started off as an event-only cigar, ended up getting our cigar of the year, became a limited production line, is expanded to a couple sizes, then Hoyt Antonio Sete, which is a Connecticut wrapper. And I think what's interesting about this for me, and I don't know, I've noticed myself gravitating more towards not lighter, but that medium, creamier, but still with some good oomph to it cigar, as opposed to just a, the old traditional Nicaraguan pepper bomb, strength, assault the taste buds kind of thing that was prevalent for a while. And so I'm just intrigued to see how Agonorsa Leaf pulls this off. They certainly seem to have gotten themselves in a good place production-wise in the last year and a half, 2 years. And again, I always want to temper my expectations with everything when it comes into a trade show. There can be a lot of, nice, flowery, exciting words that are used about cigars. But I'm intrigued to see if this one adds another good player into a segment of the market that I find myself gravitating more on the rare occasions that I get to pick what I want to smoke, and see how Agonorsa Leaf pulls this one off. Because, while there's a lot of vocal cigar smokers that like big, strong, powerful cigars. There's a lot of guys that aren't on blogs and aren't on Facebook and aren't on Twitter, and women that are looking for something that's a little bit more balanced, a little more towards the middle of the spectrum in terms of flavor and strength. But again, still flavorful, but not boring. You could say that sort of, new generation Connecticut, just the evolution of where that profile is and what it can do, and who's able to do it well. So yeah, I would agree with you on that in terms of wanting to see this one.
All right, Patrick, up next for you.
So we move on to the Arturo Fuente Don Carlos Eye of the Bull. And Charlie, you're smoking this one right now. I'm intrigued for this for a couple of reasons. Number one, I generally enjoy the Don Carlos blend tremendously. Cameroon wrapped cigar. Certainly a cigar that I have tried to turn a lot of people on to. And definitely a cigar that I know I can find in a lot of humidors, pick up, smoke, enjoy, get a real flavorful experience out of it. You may know a little bit more about this than I will. I am fascinated by the size of this thing. It's 3.5 by 55, sort of a nub-ish Vitola, which is not one that I am generally a big fan of. I think they're fine. It feels like you light it and you're kind of already watching your fingers. But again, it's been a project of Ciro Cascella, who is with Fuente. I mean, I don't know his proper title now. I mean,
I believe
everyone
he
wears
is
a couple
the
of hats.
president of Fuente International.
Thank you. And it's been a project of his for a couple of years. It was at at least the box was at the trade show last year, but as you can attest, Fuente was pretty secretive about not wanting to talk about this.
The cigar was on display at the trade show last year, as evidenced by that picture.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Just after the fact, they said that they would prefer that we not publish the pictures because there was something, which I was never told what it was, that was off about the cigar. But they didn't take the cigar out of the display case, so
right.
I was like, all right, you want me to take down we're literally having a conversation about how you want me to not publish a photograph of something as I can see someone taking a photograph of the thing.
Right. That is on display.
Yes. At a trade show.
Right. So yeah, I'm just intrigued to see what this new size does. I'm also intrigued, again, given that it was described as a project of Ciro's, if there's going to be something noticeable about this that is, maybe indicative of a change to the blend. I sort of think of, the Casa Cuba line and how I think of Divine Inspiration being just a little bit different from the rest of the sizes. I'm intrigued to see if this is appreciably different from other Don Carlos's. I mean, Charlie, you're smoking it, so what can you tell me?
Yeah, I'm doing the Lord's work here. So one feature here, you may have caught it at the beginning, but the cap of this cigar features a small circular, darker piece of tobacco, which is the Eye of the Bull reference, in case you were wondering why I showed off the cap. But back to the Eye of the Bull, or the forward-facing part of the cigar. I have found that these are a little bit... They seem to want to smoke a little bit faster and a little bit hotter than a typical Don Carlos would. And what that means is that it's going to still take me like 2 hours to smoke it, obviously. But flavor-wise, that changes things. My understanding of kind of how we taste things is that the warmer they get, the less likely we are to, after a certain point, obviously. But when they get to be what we would consider to be hot, not spicy, but actually hot in the mouth, we can't taste as much as we could if they were cooler or at, say, room temperature. And so when I smoke cigars and they tend to want to smoke quicker and burn hotter, it usually means the flavors are a little bit different, a little bit more muted, certainly more peppery. I'm smoking this right now. I'm not getting much of an increase in pepper that I would say is dramatically different than a typical Don Carlos. I certainly is a bit muted, but the flavors are more intense, just maybe a little bit less clarity with them. I don't know if the blend is designed to be any stronger. I do think that this size exists probably more as a result of manufacturing concerns than it does of of what I would say to be like, because they think that this is the next great size. I think that they've been working. I know Sierra's been working on this. He was tasked with an issue, which is that they buy all this Cameroon from the Mirafels, they pay top dollar for it, they process it, and they think they do it right. And I've yet to see somebody else that's made Cameroon cigars better than Fuente. But some of those leads aren't very large, and there's sort of only so many Don Carlos Coronas that they're willing to make, I guess. And so I think this cigar exists largely to say we have this good tobacco. It's just not large enough for a Robusto or not large enough for a Toro, and we're going to use it for this. I guess they can make more short stories, is what like every retailer watching the show is probably saying. So yeah.
Now I'm intrigued real quick. You didn't mention Cameroon flavors when you were talking about the cigar.
No, it tastes like a Don Carlos.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I tend to think of this blend as being as sort of being the hallmark for that profile. Like if I want to introduce someone to a Cameroon wrapped cigar, I tend to give them a Don Carlos. I think it's clear enough, it's distinctive enough that even someone who's got, not novice level maybe, but a little more novice level, can pick up some of those unique characteristics and go, oh, this tastes appreciably different than the other cigars I've smoked to this point.
Yeah, no, it's, I agree with you that I think Don Carlos is, I think that if somebody's comfortable enough smoking a Hemingway, I think that is where I would try to start them, but that oftentimes isn't the case. I find the Hemingways to be a bit sweeter and have a little bit less pepper than the Don Carlos does. But no, this is certainly, I would not confuse this with a Mexican San Andreas wrapped cigar by any stretch of the imagination. So it tastes like a Don Carlos, a slightly different version of it. I don't know if it's it's not the best tasting Don Carlos I've ever had, but that bar, has been set extremely, extremely high. So
right.
All right, moving on, Patrick.
Oh, it was your turn.
Oh, what's up? Yeah, it's me, despite me taking over the show again. So up next on my list is the Alfonso Gran Seleccion. This is the newest line from Selected Tobacco S.A. Auto, which is the company best known for Atabey and Byron. And by the way, if you're wondering, it is also cracking like a Cameroon cigar can oftentimes do if you're smoking it in lower humidity. I can thank the air conditioning units, I guess, for this. Anyway, back to the Alfonso. So this is the newest line from Selected Tobacco. This is the third line, to my knowledge, that has incorporated French oak as part of the aging process. Most cigars are aged for between 30 and I'd say about 120 days after rolling. It's a necessary process. I think we talked about this last week, that you need to get the humidity out of the cigars. The tobacco needs to be wet enough so that it can be rolled without cracking. And unfortunately, that's great for rolling the cigars and bunching the cigars, but it's not so great for tasting the cigars. They tend to not burn very well because there's all that moisture. So when you hear about cigars being aged, for the most part, what companies are actually doing is getting the humidity and a bit of the ammonia out of the cigars so that way they can actually burn properly and then taste properly. Selected Tobacco is a company that is kind of out on an island when it comes to aging cigars. You will hear, they've got another release of the show they claim is 10 years old. Typical cigar, 30 to 120 days, and we got a company here talking about 10-year-old cigars. These have been aged in Spanish cedar lined rooms, which is not all that uncommon, I would say, but also French oak lined rooms. And this is the third line, like I mentioned, that Selected Tobacco has introduced in the last year that has incorporated French oak. My understanding is that Nelson Alfonso, the founder of Selected Tobacco, was having a conversation with somebody, and they talked about winemaking and how in winemaking they use French oak to age wine. And so he wanted to try that with cigars. So they added some French oak to a room. And what they do is they age the cigars in these rooms and intentionally raise and lower the humidity to help sort of that maturation process in a more controlled environment. The previous two lines to this that have used this technique are the Alfonso Extra Añejo, which one of the sizes went on to be the #1 cigar of the year for Half Wheel last year, as well as the Byron 1850. And so this is the third one, aged for 5 years. They don't specify how long in each one of the two different types of rooms, but certainly a much, much longer aging process. And like so many other selected tobacco lines, you've got some interesting sizes, a lot of classic Cuban sizes or close to it. 7.5 by 40 is close but no Lancero. And then we've got the 8 by 50 Parejo there, which I'm guessing if Patrick Lagreid gets to review this cigar, that'll be the size that he gets assigned if history is any indication. Patrick, your thoughts on your upcoming review of this 8 by 50 cigar?
Yeah, I was gonna, do you have the images of it? I just want to stare at it and start thinking about it, as something that's going to come up on my to-do list here before too long.
I mean, you're definitely not going to have to think about it for 4 hours at a time, so no worries.
This is true. No, but seriously, I don't know if you have the images of this that I haven't seen show up
sorry.
yet, but thank you.
I thought I got that back on the screen.
There we go. Yeah, so, when we talk about cigars and cigar making, so much of the attention, rightfully so, gets focused on the blends, and that is for good reason. I've had so many conversations about different aspects of blending and, how much does the wrapper contribute and, what you have to do to maintain consistency across sizes, et cetera, et cetera. But as you mentioned earlier, selected tobacco has certainly gone to the far end of the bell curve when it comes to aging, not just in terms of time, but in terms of technique and what they're being aged in. We've seen tobacco that's aged in different types of spirits barrels. We've seen finished cigars aged in barrels. And it seems like Nelson Alfonso was gotten intrigued by the, using French oak in the wine world, and really went in the deep end as far as bringing it to cigars. I definitely enjoyed the Alfonso Extra Añejo #3, which ended up winning Cigar of the Year last year. I think it had the right amount of that French oak flavor, which I sort of describe as pretty dry. I remember it being mouth drying and being sort of a distinctive taste. It's not necessarily the woodiness that you tend to find in a very general term in cigars. And then when I smoked or reviewed the Byron 1850, I found it to have too much of that French oak flavor. It sort of became dominant, and it just didn't allow the rest of the flavors to really shine through. So I'm intrigued to see where this line falls, because I'm fascinated by aging and really intentional aging, because a lot of times, when we do Redux reviews, we talk about cigars with a little bit of age on them. You find old cigars in a humidor that weren't necessarily being aged for a particular reason. This is adding another dimension to the cigar blending and cigar making process, which is intentional, long-term aging in very specific conditions. And in an era where it doesn't seem like sometimes the breadth or the depth of the cigar world is necessarily expanding, this may be one pocket where it is, which is, again, very intentional, purposeful, and specifically thought out aging, both in terms of time and environment. So that's what has me most intrigued about this. And, certainly not a cheap cigar, if I'm not mistaken. Again, sort of a tough one to take a flyer on.
Selected tobacco. I
right.
think they make cheap cigars.
Yeah, and I understand this is going to be a tough one for some, for some consumers to want to take a chance on. But again, I'm optimistic, and if nothing less, I feel like it's going to be a rewarding experience to see what this current project and its aging does to the cigar. So, if anything, the only thing I would love to do is to smoke an unaged one, or just a 90-day aged one, is sort of the kind of the typical standard, versus the 10-year to do a real side by side, because I think would be the most fascinating of anything about this cigar. So.
Yeah, to clarify some numbers here, not 46 ring gauge, 40 ring gauge, so almost a classic Cuban Lancero. And then these cigars, to be clear, are aged for 5 years, according to the company.
Sorry, 5 years.
There is an Atabey, I believe, that's a 10-year-old aged cigar that's going to be on the show as well.
Yes.
All right, Patrick, I think it's your final entry onto this list.
It is. So I am not a celebrity fan. I am not, I'm not particular fan of this individual as an actor. I just on me, I'm not. But earlier this year, Epic Cigars announced it was going to be working with the actor, producer, playwright Chaz Palminteri for a cigar named A Bronx Tale, which is borrows from a play that he wrote, turned into a movie. It was the first movie directed by Robert De Niro, came out in, I believe, 1993. And what I'm intrigued by this is sort of two things. Number one, I'm just intrigued to see how much legs this cigar has. We've seen a lot of celebrities, athletes, other people put their name on cigars, and there's been various results, both in terms of the cigars themselves and how much that individual wants to go out and work the cigar. So I'm kind of intrigued to see that. But on a more selfish level, Chaz Palminteri is also a big baseball fan. So I don't know if I'm going to be covering the Epic booth yet, but I'm also intrigued to maybe talk a little baseball with him. He's a big Yankees fan. He's been on MLB Network. Seems to know a little bit more than the average fan. So looking through things that kind of stood out so far, that's what put this one on my list. Again, like I said, I don't even think I've seen A Bronx Tale, and forgive me because I'm not a great movie seer. But yeah, I'm kind of intrigued to see what this collaboration might yield, both from Epic's perspective and from Chaz Palminteri's perspective.
Yeah, I don't know if I've seen A Bronx Tale. I don't think so. So I don't have much to add here. I'm more curious about the cigar than the baseball thoughts of Chaz Palminteri, but I certainly respect the choice. Yeah, curious to see what the cigar's like. All right, final on my list here is the Illusione PCA exclusive 2023. As was pointed out to me, this is the second PCA exclusive from Illusione, though the first one, I guess it's actually coming out for a trade show that will happen. I mentioned this last week because it was on our sort of new products preview, but this is a 6x50 Toro, and there are two things that stand out to me. One of them is that this is going to be made at Raíces Cubanas in Honduras. Illusione used to make, I think, all of its cigars at Raíces Cubanas, but about a decade ago began shifting production over to Tapsa, a factory that is owned by Agonorsa and is now known as Agricola Granada de Norteño, I want to say, Aseado.
It's Camadera, but yeah.
I was close. But the factory best known, I think, still to this day is Tapsa in Esteli. Although Epernay has remained at Raíces Cubanas through all of this, from what I understand. And so I'm curious to see kind of what a return to Raíces Cubanas looks like for Illusione, because it's been some time since we've seen a new blend from that factory for the company. And they have similar to sort of Romacraft, when you're talking about quality to value to consistency, that run that Illusione had at Raíces Cubanas and extended it into their time at Tapsa, there was a time where I would say Illusione was, in that category without question. Unfortunately, over the last couple of years, I have found that new Illusione products, not necessarily the existing lines, but the new ones that I've been tasked with reviewing, a lot of times have not been put together properly. There have been bunching errors, and I can taste the tobacco, and I can taste that the tobacco seems like it's good tobacco, but I can't get a draw properly, or I'm having combustion issues, or any one of those things. So I'm curious to see if a change of scenery fixes these problems that I'm having, and I get the sense that I'm probably not the only ones that have ran into them. And those issues are magnified, I think, because of how excellent Illusione, was for a decade. I mean, it was I don't know if there was a brand that, had an average score as well as Illusione did for, probably most of Half Wheel's history. There were very, very few misses, and even when they missed, it wasn't by much. And the second thing that stands out to me that I'm curious about with this release is that it incorporates Honduran tobacco, and that's not something we typically see with Illusione. It typically is Nicaraguan puros. Maybe there's a wrapper from Mexico here and there, but typically focusing on Nicaraguan tobaccos, this is going to have a mixture of Nicaraguan and at least, I guess, one Honduran tobacco. I don't believe we have been told the full blend specs yet. Patrick, your thoughts on the Illusione PCA 2023 exclusive?
Yeah, I'm with you. I have a lot of fond memories of Illusione cigars. I think early to mid 2010s, as you said, they were seemingly hit after hit after hit. And I, put Raíces Cubanas in that same sort of statement that, there was a time that they really were the hit maker factory, and had a lot of clients that were producing cigars there. Things have changed over the years, and I don't want to say that I want Illusione to be back at that early to mid 2010s level, but I do want them to be back at that early to mid 2010s level. And I have to, I know Dion can do it. I'm puzzled by the construction issues that you were talking about in terms of how that happens, and what leads to that. You're a lot more detailed, I think, than I am when it comes to sort of assigning value and assigning cause and effect when it comes to poor construction issues to cigars. So I'm always intrigued to see what Illusione's got in the works. And again, if this return to Raíces maybe rekindles something that I have such fond memories of. So it appears Charlie is dog sitting at the moment. So everything all right there?
Yeah, no, I think Lexi's fine. It's unclear if she
Everything
wants
good?
to join the show. Yeah, Yeah. All right, so that's our list. I would just point out one last thing here. I think, I certainly don't want to speak for Patrick, but I think that we both take the job of reviewing cigars to be quite serious, like the process and those sorts of things. At the end of the day, though, I don't take myself very seriously as a cigar reviewer. This isn't something we can go to school for. There's no way to know if any of us are really any good at it. All I can tell you is that we smoke cigars in a manner that's designed to be, to evaluate them critically, both positively and negatively. And that's not how most people smoke cigars. It's not how most people do things. Like when I go to a restaurant, I'm not filling out some survey about, I don't bring my thermometer to check to see if the, chicken was at 155 degrees. So these are just our thoughts. And as I sort of mentioned, it's from time to time. Our opinions a lot of times are based primarily off of new cigars. And so I think in Illusione's case, that really stands out to me because I think the regular production, like the core line stuff, has, I think, not been as affected as the new stuff has. It just, for whatever reason, the newer Illusiones that I've smoked have been inconsistent, I would say.
Yeah, and I have to admit, just even though it's packaging, I'm still sort of getting my head around is this Illusione 2.0, 3.0, whatever we want to call it. And again, you don't smoke the bands, you don't smoke the boxes, but
sometimes you smoke the bands.
That's true. I'm still getting acclimated to this new presentation of Illusione. And again, I don't want to be the guy that sits here and clamors for the good old days, but I guess it was really there was a run that they were on that was as impressive as probably any company I've seen in the time that I've been covering cigars and smoking cigars. So, I want to see if they can get back to that level with this one.
Yeah. All right. So I know we have one question, because how could we get through this show without talking about how could we not have our weekly segment about the Fuente Patron Legends? I have no updates about this week. Maybe we'll get an update next week. Yeah, I got nothing to provide here. My understanding is the cigars are done. Take that for what it's worth.
I think if there's one update, and I'll let you speak to this, Father's Day has come and passed. And we don't have the cigars yet. Correct?
Yeah, but I guess it was different for us.
That was sort of the date that there was some chatter about, and who knew what was going on. But
Father's Day was
came
the
and
plan
went.
At one point. I don't know when that no longer became realistic, but yes, earlier this year, we were told that Father's Day was the target. These are two companies that are going to do whatever they're going to do, and they've earned the right to do that. I guess every company has the right to do that, but these companies, I think more than most, have probably earned the right to do whatever they want. And I don't think it's because they are holding out for any specific reason. I think that they're probably waiting on something to release it. That doesn't make any sense. I think that it's not that they're saying we want to release these cigars in November now. I don't think that's what happened. I think that there's something that came up that caused them to to have to delay. Again, the cigars are done, so take that for what it's worth. You can probably do some math and figure out what's the holdup. Definitely the marketing materials is what I'm getting at for this cigar. All right, so that concludes this show, and yeah, we have more live shows coming. July 8th through 11th, live from Las Vegas at the 2023 PCA Convention and Trade Show. These will be sort of one-on-one interviews. Don't know when that July 11th show will be, but probably around the same time as the first three. And don't know who the guests are because our team needs to figure that out, including myself. But we will be in Las Vegas and doing our sort of normal PCA coverage there. Patrick, I appreciate... Okay, we're going to lose all sense of Lexi here. Hey. Yeah, so, Patrick, I appreciate you for joining us.
Lunch show up, Charlie? Is that what's going on back there?
Sorry?
Did your lunch show up? Is that what's going on?
She only wishes that it was lunchtime. No, that's it's an Amazon delivery driver going across the street, which apparently they're not supposed to do, according to my sister's dog, who I am dog sitting this weekend. So I'm going to go take care of that. Patrick, I appreciate you for filling in for Brooks. And, yeah, enjoy everyone's weekend. And the next time we see you on sort of this end of the screen, we will be in Las Vegas. Oh, look at that. Cigar Hound Dog. Very on brand.
Half Wheel's coverage of the 2023 PCA Convention and Trade Show is brought to you by Rocky Patel.